Good evening. Last time we were discussing about the different layers or sheets of our being. That's why it is so called that it are many selves. We are multi-persons, as Sri Aurobindo says. So we discussed about two systems. First, the concentric system, by which we came to know about three sheets or three layers of our being, which is outer being, and behind the outer, the inner being or the subliminal, and the third one is inmost being. And at the core, it is the psychic. We also found that even in all these, in each of these beings, that is outer being, in the outer being itself, there are outer physical, there are outer vital, and there is outer mental. Likewise, there is inner physical, inner vital, and inner mental. And likewise, there is inmost physical, inmost vital, and inmost mental. So, this is the concentric system by which we know our whole being. Now, we will go a little bit into details of one after another of our being. First, we will discuss about the outer being. There are three main parts in the outer or surface being, which we all know, that is the mind or the mental, the life nature or the vital, as we know, and the body, the physical. And each part has its own distinct type of consciousness, though in the ordinary awareness, we are unable to distinguish among the mental, the vital, and the physical constituents of our consciousness. So today there will be a lot of reading, in fact, because I do not want to miss these detailed discussions which has been given to us for absorbing. So the more we go right to the discussions, written ones, we will be able to get more without missing something. Then we can a little bit come in and try to understand by ourselves. So first, what we find that normally we cannot distinguish between our mental, our vital, and our physical constituents of our consciousness. And what we do, consequently, we regard all these diverse elements of our consciousness simply as mind. We think that this is so, that's why we do something. But here it is said, but in yoga psychology, mind refers specifically to the part of the being. Let us mind the language very carefully. But in yoga psychology, mind refers specifically to the part of the being which has to do with cognition and intelligence, with ideas, with mental or thought perceptions, the reactions of thought to things, with the truly mental movements and formations. So, although generally we perceive it to be everything, whatever we think, whatever we do, we think that it is our mind which is from which it has come, and it derives everything from the mind only. Then only we come into action, we do something. But it is not so. In yoga, mind refers specifically to that part of the being, of our being, which has to do with cognition, means perceive something, then intelligence, then ideas. That means all the mental or thought perceptions, reactions to thought, to things. That means all these which are truly mental movements, these only can be termed as mental being. Likewise, the vital being or life nature is made up of desires, feelings, instincts, and impulses. It is totally different from mind. The life energy which animates the body, that is called prana, is an aspect of the vital too. The body too has its own distinct consciousness which operates in the involuntary functionings of the various bodily organs and physiological systems. So next come the vital beings. In vital being, what happens? It is full or made up of desires, our feelings, our feelings, instincts, impulses. So all these things come in the vital. That is not the mind. So it is coming from the vital only. And finally, what we found, the body too has its own distinct consciousness which operates in the involuntary functioning of the various bodily organs and physiological systems. Body consciousness is only part of the physical consciousness. Body also knows its own way of reacting to situations. So, in all this, what we understand that though normally or generally we think that it is our mind only by which we tend to do things, we come into mode of action. It is not purely so, because we will now know why it is so. Though separate and distinct, the three main divisions of the outer being just mentioned are interconnected and interact on one another, giving rise to distinguishable subdivisions in the main parts of the being. You see, even in the suppose we are talking about the outer being now. In this outer being, there are three different parts, as we have discussed already, that it is mind or the mental being, the vital being, and the physical being. Even in the outer being, there are subdivisions. We will find it. Thus, besides the thinking mind, that is the mind proper, there is a vital mind. Now you see, there is a vital mind, because vital is also intermixed now with the mind, which is the part of the mind that is intermixed with the vital. The vital mind, unlike the thinking mind, is not governed by reason but is dominated by impulses and desires of the vital, and seeks to justify and rationalize actions which are based on impulses and desires of the vital. Normally, what we think, when someone is in rage, when someone gets upset, immediately he gets angry. Where does it come from? It doesn't come from the mind. It comes from the mind, but it is mixed with our vital, because those are impulses. The rage or the anger is an impulse. An impulse belongs to that seed, that domain of vital. So it is intermixed with mind. It is a vital mind that immediately rouses uh, that particular impulse of rage or anger in us. So likewise, there are so many which is mixed up with the vital. Another subdivision is the physical mind, which is the part of the mind that is intermixed with the physical and partakes of the characteristics of the physical consciousness, such as inertia, obscurity, and mechanical repetitiveness, which manifest in the physical mind as mental torpor and conservatism, doubt, and obsessive thoughts. These are physical, intermixed with physical. This is also mind, but intermixed with physicality. So it is physical mind. The part of the mind which is closest to the physical is called the mechanical mind. Why mechanical? Because it does something in a repetitive manner. Its characteristic is that of a machine that goes on turning round and round all the time, wherever thoughts occur in it. So it gets repeated. There is no rhyme and reason, no proper mind involved in it. It keeps on repeating in a same pattern. Another subdivision which is important for self understanding is the physical vital. It is the part of the vital which is turned entirely upon physical things and is full of desires and seeking for pleasures on the physical plane. So there are so many subdivisions as we see. Another is what? It is physical vital. So you see now in the outer being itself, it is mental, vital, and physical being. And again, there is intermixture between mind and vital, between mind and physical, between vital and physical. All those subdivisions are there. So we cannot normally distinguish from where it is coming. So until and unless we know clearly, we are even mentally aware of all these things and then try to connect ourselves when something comes from outside or where from it is coming. If we do not know, how can we distinguish from where it is coming? What is the source of it? If it is not to be accepted, if it is to be rejected, all these things, if we do not know, then we cannot do anything and we will be puppets as it is. That is why before coming to the integral path, it is very difficult for people to understand even why problems or difficulties occur, why we keep on falling into traps, falling into whatever mental traps, vital traps, physical traps, or fall into situations from where we cannot come out or suffer. We do not know even. These things for some novice would seem to be very, naive or very, what it is called, uh, some vague ideas. All these things are not concrete, but these are the truths. And truth is not given to each and everyone. Truth is, or truth rather, can be obtained only when the psychic keeps pressure on the outer being. The psychic uses the mind, our vital, and our physical even to get a glimpse of the truths that is being given to us in teats and beats, preparing ourselves to make the vessel ready, open ourselves up to the higher consciousness, which is dominated by the Divine Mother And the more we become receptive to her consciousness, her actions, then it becomes easier for us rather than to remain in that clot, in that mud from which it is very difficult to come out. So, in any case, coming back to our texts, another subdivision which is important for self understanding is the physical vital. It is the part of the vital which is turned entirely upon physical things and full of desires and seekings for pleasure on the physical plane. Closely connected with it is the vital physical, the part of the vital force which constitutes the nervous being. It is the vehicle of the nervous responses and is related to the reactions, desires, sensations of the body. We feel that when we feel something, when we get nervous, when some fear comes up, anything, when some rage or anger comes up, we do not know how or from where it is originated. How is it that I got entangled into it? We do not know. But here Sri Aurobindo has given us everything. Only thing we'll have to ensure that we delve a little deeper into his writing and also connect with our day-to-day life. Then slowly and slowly we can bring, the connection. We come to know how everything works out. Next, we'll be discussing about the inner being, the subliminal, under which we'll be finding some interesting facts about these, how others' sensations, others' desires come in and enter into our being without even knowing. So, first, let us discuss about this, the inner being, or which is called the subliminal. I believe some of you earlier had wanted to know about this subliminal. I think Sanchita Ben. So I had it in my mind, and today it's very interesting that you have come. Behind the surface or frontal consciousness of the outer being, there is an inner or subliminal consciousness upon all the three levels: physical, vital, mental. So, what is the frontal consciousness? The outer being, which consists again of mind, vital, and physical. But behind this, there is another consciousness which is called the inner or the subliminal consciousness. Thus, there is an inner mind in the inner being or the subliminal. There is an inner mind, an inner vital, and an inner physical, just like the outer being also. The inner mind is in touch with the now you see, these are to be noted. The inner mind is in touch with the universal mind. It is always connected with the universal mind. The inner vital with the universal life forces, and the inner physical with the universal physical forces around us. Thus, whereas the outer being knows things only indirectly from their outer touches, as perceived through the senses and outer mind, the inner being is directly aware of the surrounding universal forces that act through us. This is clearly written here that in the outer being, what happens? We come to know or we perceive things by our outer touches, outer sensory organs. Like when we see something, we know that it is. When we hear something, then we think it is. Likewise, all these outer being, all are outer touches as perceived through the senses. But in the inner being, what happens? It has got a direct awareness of the surrounding universal forces. It is connected directly. It needs no touch, no outer seeing as we see. That means it doesn't have to do anything with the physicality. In the outer being, we touch something, then we know that it is hot or it is cold. When we see something, then only we can see that it has a color such as red, it is green, it is blue. When you hear something, then we can say whether it is harsh or soothing in our ear. We can differentiate. But here, in the inner consciousness or the subliminal consciousness, it has a direct awareness of the surrounding universal forces. And now, about the environmental consciousness, which is also called the circumconscient. Sri Aurobindo calls it the circumconscient, and Mother calls it the nervous envelope. Same thing. The inner or subliminal being receives the contacts of the environing world through the environmental consciousness or the circumconscient, a formation of the subliminal consciousness which projects itself beyond the body. You see, we have something which is a very, very subtle envelope around our whole body. Probably we had discussed, I do not know with whom, on earlier occasions, on earlier sittings, that all these universal forces can enter into us and always do so, but we do not know. Only when there is a chink in this particular subtle envelope, which is called the nervous envelope or the circumconscient. If it is intact, if we are conscious of it, we cannot let anything penetrate through this envelope. But if we are not aware, then as it is, it will be entering into our being first through that envelope, then only into our physical or outer being. Then it will take its own form, going to mental, it will form its own thing, going into vital, it will arouse our impulses, whatever it is, and in the physical also, it will keep on working. So this is basically the most important thing, that is the environmental consciousness or the circumconscient. Here it is written, it is through this environmental consciousness that the thoughts, feelings, etc. of others pass to enter into one. It is through this also that waves of the universal force, desire, sex, anger, hatred, come in and take possession of the mind, vital, or body. We do not know even. Each man has his own personal consciousness entrenched in his body and gets into touch with his surroundings only through his body and senses, and the mind using the senses. Yet, all the time, the universal forces are pouring into him without his knowing it. He is aware only of thoughts, feelings, etc. that rise to the surface, and these he takes for his own. Don't we do it normally? Usually, what we do, suppose I feel anger rushing up in me. I do not know where it is originated. I do not know that I'm receiving it through a gap, through a chink, which has entered into through that pass, through a chink into my being, and has found form in me, which has resulted in this anger. Really, they come from outside in mind waves, vital waves, waves of feeling and sensation, etc., which take particular form in him and rise to the surface after they have got inside. It is very interesting to try to understand these things if only we are a little bit attentive. Have you ever observed, suppose there is a frenzy of the mob, something has happened, and there were thousands of people, lakhs of people, and something happened suddenly. The mob got angry and they went berserk. Whatever they find, they destroyed. And some people who even didn't know what was happening, they also catch the vibration. They do not seek the rhyme and reason even, and they join these people which had started this. Have you observed it? I think most of us are like this. Only thing we do not observe. I have given a little example only, but it keeps on happening all the time. I have given an example of mob, but usually it's happening all the while in the whole universe itself. Take the case of this pandemic. The moment it started in some corner of the globe, it percolated down. So many discussions started going, and finally it overwhelmed the whole human race itself. Nobody even tried to delve a little deeper to see how much or how much authenticity or what is the root of it actually. Maybe it is authentic or something very much, it has its own ground in different ways. But where does it stand actually, and how far and to what extent? But we are so involved in it that it has overwhelmed our whole life system. Can you imagine? And this is still going on. So until and unless we know ourselves first, at least mentally, then try to connect um, these, one may say, thoughts, ideas, but these are the true things. These are so true that only when one can um, connect these with the real happening in one's life, then only someone realizes that how true it is. Only thing, one has to endure, one has to invoke a higher working, and finally it is the mother, without whose help we cannot go a step forward. So this way, you see, we are just like puppets, marionettes. The strings are being orchestrated somewhere else. And what is that? It is the subliminal of which we are discussing now. There are so many forces in the subliminal itself. good, bad. So unless and until we know all these things, how do they operate? Why do they operate? What is the right way to sift out, to differentiate the right one from the wrong one, which is coming in and trying to invade our being? It is difficult. But they do not get into his body at once. He carries about with him an environmental consciousness called by the Theosophists the aura. The Theosophists, Madame Blavatsky, a lot of people might be knowing about Theosophical Society. So Theosophists call it an aura. A lot of people know about aura. So it is that actually. In Sri Aurobindo's term, it is circumconscient. In Mother's term, it is nervous envelope. It's the same thing. So first, it has to penetrate through that, into which they first enter. If you can become conscious of this environmental self of yours, then you can catch the thought, the passion, the suggestion or force of illness and prevent it from entering into you. You see how beautifully they have given us, at least they have left for us, immense treasures. But only thing is that we'll have to endure. We cannot go with shortcuts. Normally, we people tend to we tend to um, seek immediate results. But out of immediacy, we cannot get anything which can sustain. Truth is very deep. So we'll have to endure. We'll have to invoke the force, higher force, mother's force into us for protection. Even if we sleep 1,000 times, still we'll have to rely only on one single force, that is mother's. Or for that matter, the same thing, Sri Aurobindo's. Because till now, it is the highest or the supreme force that has descended or manifested upon earth through them. That's the truth of it. So next, it is the inmost being or the psychic being. On psychic being also we have discussed earlier, but still we'll be discussing about it. So Sri Aurobindo uses the term psychic being from Greek word "psyche", meaning the soul, for the inmost being which supports the outer and the inner beings. The psychic being, in its essence, called the psyche or psychic entity, is a spark or portion of the divine present in all things and creatures that we all know. That psychic is the evolving part of the divine presence in human being. If that was not there, we wouldn't have been able to progress even a little bit. In the course of evolution, the psyche grows into an individual psychic personality in the human being and is then called the psychic being. Whereas the universal self, the Atma, is unborn. unborn and stillborn also, that portion, the presence of the divine, which is above us, that is also called the Jivatma. And it is not individualized. When it takes position in our being, then only slowly it keeps on evolving and it becomes individualized, a psychic being. The first soul is there. First, above there, it is the Jivatma, universal self, and it takes position when someone is born. Then that portion is called the soul. And along the journey, different through different births, it's an unceasing journey through different births, through different experiences. The essence of those experiences, the essence, the divine essence of those experiences is preserved around the soul, and in due course, that due course is a long duration which we cannot measure by time unit, because it might be even 1,000 years also. See how many births will that it be. So through all these years, acquiring is the essence of divinity around the soul, the psychic is formed, the psychic entity is formed and grows in its stature. And the more it becomes concrete, fully bloomed, it can exert its pressure into our mind. Now you can become aware of these things so beautifully that only then, when the psychic becomes dominant, it remains backward within, but when it becomes fully bloomed, then it will first exert pressure, then reign over our mind, our vital, and even our physical being. But before that, there is a discipline you have to follow, that triple labor which Sri Aurobindo calls the aspiration, the rejection, and the surrender. That discipline will have to follow till it grows or blooms fully. The psychic being can at first exercise only a concealed and partial and indirect action to the mind, the life, and the body, since it is these parts of nature that have to be developed as its instruments of self expression, and it is long confined by their evolution. You see, because as we just found out that our outer being is connected to the inner being, which is again connected to the universal nature, so we receive all those elements which are always at war with each other. That is why last time probably, or in the previous one, we discussed about uh, the heterogeneity of our being. Heterogeneity means dispersed. It is not homogeneous. It is not one single unit, because so many elements coming from so many diverse forces are in action in our being, and we do not know where the thought, where the impulse, where the movement, where the action originate. Now, when we grow in our consciousness, or rather let grow our consciousness, through increased action of the psyche through this discipline, then what happens? Our mind, our vital, our physical, all these heterogeneous being elements becomes, or rather comes under one master, that is the psychic. Mission to lead man in the ignorance towards the light of the divine consciousness. It takes the essence of all experience in the ignorance to form a nucleus of soul growth in the nature. The rest, it turns into material for the future growth of the instruments, which it has to use until they are ready to be a luminous instrumentation of the divine. So, this soul or this psychic is mission to lead man in the ignorance. So beautiful wordings is Sri Aurobindo. It is the psychic personality in us that flowers as the saint, the sage, the seer. The saint, the sage, the seer, because of the growth in their consciousness in the psychic, they they can see through the outer veil or outer frontal appearance, see through the veils and see the truth behind the veil. That is why they can say that this is going to happen, or at least there's a possibility of happening this and that, not by ego, when they can only see the truth or can only hear the word, word with a capital W, that is a divine word coming straight from the divine, Shruti, then only they say something. So these are the ones, saint, the sage, the seer, in whom psychic personality blooms slowly, gradually, and it can happen to all who persevere. It is not that there have been people whom the mother have called to collaborate, not only in the ashram, in Pondicherry, in so many remote places, even in Africa, you will see. In Nairobi, there is a center where young youngsters read Savitri before going to sleep. Their parents are so, I mean, of course, there must be a growth in the psychic personality. There is something which imbibes them to pass it on to their future generation. These youngsters read Savitri before they go to sleep at night. How beautiful. And imagine the day when all the people, at least majority of the people living on earth, will be reading Savitri. What will be the environment like? Even by reading Savitri properly, the consciousness of the world can be transformed. So It is the psychic personality in us that flowers as the saint, the sage, the seer. When it reaches its full strength, it turns the being towards the knowledge of self and the divine, towards the supreme truth, the supreme good, the supreme beauty, love, and bliss, the divine heights and largenesses, and opens us to the touch of spiritual sympathy, universality, oneness. You see, we can bring out so many. Nowadays, what happens? Lot of organizations, in their own way, according to their own belief, bring out rallies for peace, do lot of things, but eventually nothing, the result is not to that extent which we can accept as something to be, satisfied with. And it cannot. Sri Aurobindo has Sri Aurobindo himself has said about it that no machinery, no rules and regulations, no machinery can change, no system can change this consciousness of earth steeped into ignorance until and unless one truly tries to find the truth consciousness. And of course, one has to pay a hefty price for that. There is no shortcut. There is no shortcut in anything permanent. But Sri Aurobindo has made it much more easier for us. The Mother has made it much more easier for us, taking the whole burden of humanity in their shoulders. And that is not something which can be just shied away. That's why, with the passing of days, the truth is manifesting, and it is everywhere. Sri Aurobindo and the Mother and the integral path. Even when people do not know about Sri Aurobindo and the Mother, they are searching for that something, coming closer to what Sri Aurobindo and Mother has said or written in various voluminous books. And the moment someone is a little bit open, even immediately he or she comes closer. Why? Because it is a call rather than searching for something. It is a call from the divine, from the Mother and Sri Aurobindo themselves, that come, the right moment has come for you to collaborate. That's why you see nowadays young children, very, very young, they're asking questions related only to these things. So today we'll be concluding here itself, and in the next session we'll be discussing about other things like subconscious and inconscient, and also superconscient, starting from the higher mind through the different planes of consciousness right up to the supermind, and also beyond that is the unmanifest state of uh, existence, consciousness, and bliss, that is Satchidananda. So if you have anything to ask, then you can go ahead, please. Or otherwise, we can conclude today. Thank you.